Hi, in this video we will give a short introduction to Erwin. In this video we will use Erwin, which is a tool for designing and modeling databases, and we will use SQL Server to implement the tables we are creating using Erwin. The following editions can be downloaded for free on internet. So we have Erwin, the community edition, which can be downloaded for free, and we have an edition of SQL Server called SQL Server Express edition, which is also free to download. So the overview of this video is first to create and design the tables using Erwin, then make an SQL script, and then execute the SQL script within SQL Server. And then you are ready to go, start using the database, inserting data, etc. First, a little bit about design and modeling in general. Here we see two tables. We have a book table and we have a chapter table. In the book table we have a primary key called book ID, and then we have some columns, book title and summary. In the chapter table we have a chapter ID, which is a primary key, and here we have the book ID, which is a foreign key to the primary key column in the book table. And then we have some columns here as well, chapter number and chapter title. Here are some best practice regarding database design. In general, the name of the tables should be in uppercase, and you should use a singular form. For instance, student and not students. For columns, you should typically use Pascal notation like this, student ID. And each table needs a primary key. And typically in a course table, you name the primary key column course ID like this. And typically the primary key column should be an integer and an identity column, meaning every time you enter something into that table, the primary key will be automatically generated by the system. And you should also standard on some few data types like int, float, varchar, datetime, etc. When designing and implementing a database, these are the recommended steps. You should use a tool like Erwin to model or design the database, and then within that tool you can generate a table script, and that table script you can save it to a file and then open the same file within SQL Server or other database systems, and then running the script, the tables will be generated inside the database. And then when you have the tables up and running, you can create stored procedures, views, triggers, etc. inside the SQL Server if needed. And little bit about Erwin. In this video we will use the community edition, which is free of charge. It has some limitations. You can only create 25 tables. That's not enough in many cases. So you can download it from free using this link. Here we see an example created in Erwin. We have different tables, table names, primary keys is on the top, and then we have the relationships between tables with primary keys and foreign keys. So when we want to create a new database model in Erwin, first thing we need to do is to select what kind of database we want to use. So we select the database we want to use and the edition or the version of that database. Next, we may need to set up some page setup. Typically we want to have a page size A4, and you typically want to have it in landscape mode. So let's start a simple exercise in Erwin. We want to create these two tables a book table and a chapter table. You see it a little bit larger here. So the book table has a primary key called book ID and some columns, and the chapter table has a primary key, chapter ID, and it has a foreign key linked to the primary key in the book table, and it has additional 2 columns, chapter number and chapter title. So first, in Erwin, we use the entity tool in order to create new tables. So you just click on this symbol and create the tables you need, and then you can use the tab and enter in order to give the tables a name and to create columns inside each table. And we can also use the arrows to switch between the columns inside the table. Next, we need to use the relationship tool to create the primary key, foreign key relationships. So first you click on a primary key table, and then you click on the foreign key table using the relationships tool, and the relationship is then created automatically by Erwin. Next, we need to set some data types. So each column needs to have a specific data type. It could be integer, varchar, boolean, etc. Yeah, and you may need to set some other attributes, and then you do that in the attribute editor. So let's start creating this simple example in Erwin. Then I have opened Erwin, and we are ready to create the first example in Erwin. So let's start File, New. So a new model. We typically select both logical and physical model, and then we select the database we want to use. In our case, we want to use SQL Server, and we want to use the latest edition, latest version. Then click OK. So here is our modeling window. Typically we could go to page setup, typical landscape, and A4 like this, and then next we can start creating tables. So we just click on the entity tool, click once, creating the name of the table. We start with the book table like this, and then we use the tab button to start entering the column. And then we have a book ID. It should be the primary key, and we click tab once more to create the other columns. We have book title. We hit the tabulator, and then we can add more columns if you want to. So we use the tabulator, and if you need more columns, you just hit enter like this. Write summary in this case. Hit, and then we are finished with the book table, and then we select the entity tool once more, and then we create the chapter table. This, hit the tabulator, enter the primary key, chapter ID, hit the tabulator, book ID, we hit enter, chapter number, we hit enter, and chapter title like this. And now our columns and tables should be finished. Next, we want to create the foreign key and primary key relationships. But first, we can also adjust the zoom level here, so you see a little bit better like this. And then you can use the non-identification relationship like this. So we click this one, and you click on the primary key table, and then we click on the foreign key table like this, and then a window like this pops up. You can just click OK like this, and the primary key, foreign key relationships has been created, and you see this is a foreign key using the FK attribute like this. Next, we want to create the data types, so we just right click on the table, start with the book table, and select attribute properties, and then we can select the data type here. So book ID, typically an integer, so you select integer for this one. Book title and summary, they could be typically a char or a varchar, so we select varchar for this. Varchar, and book title could be varchar 50 or something. Summary, varchar, let's say varchar 100, like this. And then, oh sorry, it was the wrong data type. Varchar, like this, and select 100, like this. And we see also here the book ID is set as a primary key, like this. Then we click close, and do the same for the chapter table. Right click, select attribute properties, then we select the same data type here. So book ID is, since it's a foreign key, it needs to have the same data type as the primary key, in this case integer. Here is the chapter ID, which in our case is an integer. Integer, and the chapter number could also be an integer, like this, and the book chapter title could be a varchar, like this, and it could be varchar 50, like this. And now we have set the proper data types on the book and the chapter table. So you see, so far we have used the logical model. If you want to check the data types for the physical model, we just select the physical model and then right click on the book table. You see here we have the column properties, and then here we see we have the correct data types for the physical model as well. And the same for the chapter table, column properties, and then we have the proper data types. In our case, we just created a very simple database model with just 2 tables. We could create more. Here are some examples in this case. So we could have a table for author, table for publisher, a table for a book category, etc. But I let you try these tables. Next, we want to create a SQL script with Erwin, so we can use that script within SQL Server or other database systems. So here is how we create such a script in Erwin. First, you need to make sure you are in the physical model, and then 2, select forward engineering and schema in the actions menu like this, and then this window pops up, and then you select table, and then here you have lots of options you can select or deselect based on what you want to include in your script. When you think you are finished, you can click the preview and see how the scripts look like. And then when you are satisfied with the script, you can click the save button, and then you have a script we can execute within SQL Server. So let's try this in Erwin. So now we are back in Erwin. We have our tables here, and we have selected the physical model, and we go to the Actions menu, select Forward Engineer and Schema, like this, and this window pops up, and then we have the table here, and then we can select the properties we want to include. We want to create a table, we don't need procedure, function. So typically these are the things we need. So let's see how it looks like. See here we have a script for creating the book table, and then here the primary key is created, and then here the chapter table is created, and here the primary key is created, and then we have some SQL code for creating the foreign key. So here we have some trigger we may not need, so let's remove that part. So we go through the different options there. We had some triggers we don't want to use, so just remove everything here. We start from top. Security, nothing. Server, nothing. Database, nothing. So we want to create, we don't want to create these things, so you just remove it. The columns, we want to create the columns. View, we don't need views. And the index, we don't need the index as well. And this, we need the primary key and foreign key. Now we could try once more. Click the preview, and then we have the table, the primary key, the second table, the columns, and the primary key and the foreign key. So this should be a good script to use within SQL Server. So we click the save button, we just save it on our desktop or on the PC. So let's just call it database script or something. And then we can use .sql. So let's save it, and then we are ready to go. Next we want to use SQL Server to execute the script we just created in Erwin. First, a short introduction to Microsoft SQL Server. Microsoft SQL Server consists of a database engine. The database engine takes care of everything for you. It's just a service running in the background on your computer. So it handles all the data inside the database. And then we have the Management Studio, which is a graphical user interface which we can use to create new tables, to create new database, new tables, etc. within a graphical user interface. So here we see the Management Studio. On the left we have our databases, and in each database we have tables, views, etc. And then on the right side we can click New Query in order to create new queries. So that's what we are going to do. But first we need to create just a new database. So we right click on the databases on the left side and create new database, and then we enter a name for our database like this. And then when we have created the database, we can select new query and then open the query we made in Erwin, and then we can click execute in order to create the tables within our database. So let's do this inside SQL Server. So now we are inside Microsoft SQL Server. So here on the left side we have the databases. So you just right click here to create a new database. And since you are dealing with books and chapters, we could create a database called library or something like this, and just click OK. And then the library database has been created here on the left side, and then we could start execute our SQL script. So we just click new query, and then here on the right side we can open our query. So you just select open file and then find our query. So here is it, the database script. Just open it, and then here we see the tables. So you just click execute, and then command completed successfully, and then we can go to our library database inside tables, and then we see the book table and the chapter table has been created. We can also go into the database diagram. Just click yes here the first time. Create new database diagram, and then select our tables like this and click close, and then you see our tables has been created within SQL Server. You can also right click here to select the table view standard. So here is the book table with the proper data types, and here chapter table, select standard, and then we have the chapter tables and the columns and the proper data types like this, and we have the primary key and the foreign key relationship. So now we are ready to start using our database. Now we can test our database to see that everything works as planned. So we can go to the book table, we can right click and edit top 200 rows, and then we can start entering some books. So let's enter some books. C# programming is a book, and then we could enter some summary and click enter, and then you see we have created this book inside the database. You could create a new book, Visual Basic, like this, and then we can enter more books. The same in chapter. So if you want to add a chapter for the C# programming book, we have to remember that the book ID is number 1. So then right click on the chapter, edit top 200 rows, and then the chapter ID is automatically generated, but this one should be 1. And chapter number 1 is about its introduction, like this. Chapter number 2 for the same book could be start programming or something like this. And then we have created 2 chapters within the same book. Based on this video, you could create this exercise by yourself. So in this exercise I have created a student table, a grade table, course table, school table, class table, teacher table, etc. So let's see if you are able to create this example in Erwin by yourself, and then create a script and execute the script within SQL Server. That's all for today. Thank you.